Mogu'shan Vaults, which is the first raid of Mr. Pandaria, has been available on the beta for the last couple of days. It opened on Friday and it closes tomorrow, which is Monday. And I've spent the best part of the last couple of days just in there non-stop. I've done probably 5 or 6 runs by now. Now, I've tanked it, I've healed it, I've DPS'd it, I've done the majority of the bosses on Heroic, even though some of them are bugged and we've actually had to change the way we even approach the fights. So we're not doing the fights as they're intended or the way that we will be doing it when it's live and it's fixed. But as someone who's done quite a lot of Mogu'shan Vaults over the last few years anyway, it was actually quite fun kind of having to work new tactics out around bugs. Now, overall, it seems like people are really enjoying Mogu'shan Vaults. I personally have really been enjoying it, and the difficulty has been a little bit different from what I was expecting, as in, I actually think the bosses, their self and their abilities are not hitting on Heroic as hard as I would have thought they was going to hit, but the bosses are pretty well tuned for the gear level that we're actually in. Now, as I say, some of the bosses are more bugged than others, and we will get to those, and if you want to see any of my runs, all of the VODs are available there. Obviously long VODs because we've been doing sort of 5-6 hours raiding at a time, but they're all available on kick.com/Scottejaye if you want to go and see any of the kills from any of the monk perspectives, because as I say, I've been doing it as all 3 roles. I will be streaming tonight at 9 PM UK time as well, just purely on Kick. I'll be back on Twitch again during the week, but for these raid tests where I actually want to focus, I'm just purely on Kick, and most of the time, to be fair, I'm completely ignoring chat, so it's not particularly entertaining for anyone other than the fact that you get to see the raids. But that's because most of the time I'm having to actually raid lead, so I'm having to give my full attention to the raid and not the stream. But anyway, firstly, has there been any shocks? I've been in there with most classes and specs, and in terms of who's doing how much damage, I would say my top 3 videos that I've done, so top 3 range DPS, top 3 melee DPS, etc. For the people that I've been playing with, they've seemed pretty accurate, if I'm honest with you. Survival Hunters absolutely blasting, and to be honest, fairly untouchable from the groups that I've been in. I know other people's groups will vary. Some you'll probably have hunters that are really bad and they're not doing that much damage, but I think across the board, if you was to look at the average, I think Survival Hunter is just absolutely blasting on every boss. Frost Mages and Warlocks are doing really well as well. Sub-Rogue, Arms Warrior, Unholy DK, all doing really good damage as we would expect. But the one I've been kind of surprised by, thankfully, is Windwalker. I think Windwalker on single target and obviously Cleave, where it absolutely excels, is kind of from where I would have considered it being very middle of the pack to more, let's say, the top end of the middle of the pack, if you like. Now, that's purely just based on my own experience. I have glossed through other logs, and in all of the logs I'm seeing Hunters blasting, Unholy DKs, Arms Warriors, Rogues, etc. I've not seen that many Windwalkers actually raiding, but I think good Windwalkers are actually doing really well, to be fair. Firstly, difficulty-wise, a lot of people ask how much of a step up raiding in Mr. Pandaria is, and to be fair, it is. Once you get to Heart of Fear Heroic onwards, the raids really do start to ramp up in difficulty. But I would personally say, even taking these bosses in a bugged state, that 0% Dragon Soul Heroic is probably on par, if not a little bit more difficult. The entirety of Mogu'shan Vaults is a tank raid. Literally every boss relies on your tanks being good, and everyone else has just got to avoid as much damage as they can and use cooldowns. Like, quite honestly, that is it. There's a popular strategy on Stone Guard where you'll just stack. You'll stack them all. It's very predictable when the big damage is going to come in because it's when they all reach 100 energy, they do an explosion, and you'd use raid cooldowns. Now, I'm sure some people did manage to get through this, but with the raid comps that we've been running, we just didn't have that amount of cooldowns to actually get through them multiple times. Yes, we could survive the first one, but we've already blown our Spirit Link and Barrier and everything to actually get through it, so then the second one is problematic. So in all the groups that I've been doing, we've been doing Stone Guard correctly. So basically, you're going to keep the one that's exploding with the other one that's on the lowest energy, and you're going to be taunt swapping. But the full reliance of that fight to work correctly relies on your tanks. The same goes for Feng. On Feng, which is the second boss, you've got 2 crystals, one which is a barrier and one which is a reversal. Now, the reversal you'll use on somebody else and basically steal a spell. So the most important part of this is when you're on the fist section, which is the top right of the room, is being able to spell steal the lightning fist so you can stun him when he does the big AoE, which is called Epicenter. Now, honestly, if your tanks get this wrong, things start to spiral out of control. You can heal through it, you can move out of the Epicenter and get out of range and use cooldowns and get through it fine without it, but quite honestly, the whole fight is made easier by your tanks being able to communicate and understand when they're meant to be using their extra action buttons. Even the third boss, which is Scottejaye, it might not seem like a tanking fight on the face of it, but If your tank goes down and can't notice the fact that one of the masks has got no health bar if you're using nameplates, so where you can see the health bars above all of the mobs, if your tank don't notice that one and he doesn't kill it, he's not going to get out in time, he's going to die. Your tank's using cooldowns to minimize the amount of damage that the voodoo dolls take. Like, there's a lot going on every boss. I could literally go through all 6 bosses and tell you why the entire raid it's basically a playground for tanks. Out of all 3 roles as a monk, even though I love Windwalker, it's probably my number 1 spec. In Mogu'shan Vault specifically, nothing beats tanking it as a brewmaster. Nothing beats tanking it, full stop. It's just a fun raid to tank. But tanking it as a brewmaster, it's just insane. Healing-wise, mana regen seems completely broken. Now, I've not looked into the nitty-gritty of it because I'm not really playing a healer main. I'm normally Brewmaster or I'm Windwalker, but no one seems to be having mana issues whatsoever, which in early levels of gear is a little bit weird. So I'm assuming, which you can let me know in the comments, if you do play a healer main, it looks like spirit levels are bugged completely, like you've just got far too much mana regen in combat. But healing the raid's pretty fun as well. Obviously, I've done a lot of healing on it on private servers, so I've not done that much healing on the beta. I've done far more tanking and Windwalker, but overall it's what you'd expect. If you want to make Stoneguard easier, free healing, it does make it more comfortable, but it's absolutely 2 healable. And then all the other fights you want to be using 2 healers. The one thing that's really showing is that meta comp that we've spoke about in so many videos in the build up to these raids opening has been Resto Shaman Disc Priest. I'm talking specifically 10-man here, but Disc Priest is so strong on all of these bosses, but particularly Elegon. With the damage amp that Elegon takes and having a Disc Priest just abusing the life out of Atonement, it just does so much healing. Like, a Disc Priest can literally carry the entirety of Elegon Heroic, which is bugged also, by the way. So let's fly through what the bugs are, because in terms of how fun the raid's been from all different roles, I think it's great. In terms of how much damage each class is doing, if you check my top 3 videos out or watch the one big video where I compiled the 4 top 3 videos into one, so you could call it a top 12 video if you like, but top 3 range, top 3 melee, top 3 tanks, top 3 healers, I honestly would say you can't go far wrong with that. And so far in the beta, I think, yeah, it'll work out pretty well for you if you was to pick one of those. But the bugs. So if you haven't done Mogu'shan Vaults either for a long time, or you haven't done it on private servers or anything like that, then you might think some of this is normal, but some of it's not normal. So let's talk about the glaringly obvious bugs first. And they really do come at the end, and that's Spirit Kings and Elegon. But let's start with Spirit Kings Heroic. Now, we haven't even killed it on the beta. We've killed the first 3 on Heroic, so Stoneguard, Feng, Scottejaye, and then we've killed Elegon Heroic, but we've not done Spirit Kings or Will of the Emperor. Now, we've killed Spirit Kings on private servers, so we're not really that bothered. We know the mechanics and how it's meant to work, and it's not working like that. If you've got a monk, you can almost make it feel like it's not bugged, because the main thing is the fact that the Annihilate, which is a big conal attack, follows the tank. Now, you're meant to obviously be able to avoid this. It does Annihilate, everyone moves behind the boss, and then once it's finished, you all stand in front and share the cleave damage again. Now, as a monk, you can actually just roll backwards and outrange the Annihilate, so everybody else just moves through and avoids it. Or we was doing actually another tank when we didn't have a monk was taunting, so as it was going off, we'd all stand in it, and it looks like we're all about to get hit by it, but another tank would be stood on the other side and taunt it, so it annihilates away from us. The thing is, we don't want to get people into bad habits. Like, we don't want people who are in the group that don't know the fight inside out and haven't wiped on it hundreds of times in the past to think this is normal, you know, and get used to the way raid bosses are in a bug state. We'd rather show them, get them most of the way through the fight, and then it's like, cool, it doesn't matter. Once it's fixed, and then we're doing it in the second round of testing, then we'll take the bosses a little bit more seriously. And the same goes for Elegon. If you got to Elegon Heroic, and when you're actually phasing into the final phase where all the outside of the room, so outside of the bubble, becomes electrified, and you can't stand outside, you need to be inside. At that point, basically, you stack, you nuke the boss, and the boss dies before you die, and you get the loot. Well, what's actually happening on the beta is you're taking the damage as if you were stood outside the lightning shield for about 5 or 6 seconds, because what it looks like it tracks is when you're inside the bubble, so you're inside the big barrier, you get a damage buff. At the moment, on the beta, it takes a while for that buff to actually go on you, even when you go into that phase. So it looks like the way it tracks whether you're in or out the bubble is whether you've got that damage buff. Now, because that damage buff isn't going on immediately as soon as you go into the phase, it thinks you're outside, so everyone starts taking ridiculous damage. Now, don't quote me on that, but that's kind of the conclusion that we came to, because that's what it looks like that's actually happening. Now, it doesn't change things too much, but all it means is you've got to blow all of your raid cooldowns immediately, because instead of being able to use your raid cooldowns at the end of the fight as the damage starts to ramp up and up and up, you're having to blow everything to get through that one small bugged section of the raid. So it's about 5 seconds, but to get through it, you're taking like 70 odd K every half a second. So to get through those 5 seconds, you have to just use absolutely everything, which means then when you're actually in the end phase, the final phase that you need to use your cooldowns in, you haven't got any cooldowns. So we got round it and we killed it, but if you've been doing Elegon and wondering what is going on at that point, that's what it looks like to us. And then Will of the Emperor, even the dance seems pretty buggy. So if you don't know about Will of the Emperor, again, it's a tank fight, funny enough. You're literally having to do some dancing with the bosses to avoid some swings. Then you get an extraction button that does a load of damage. But it seemed very weird. I've done that dance so many times as a tank, and every time seemed a little bit different. So sometimes he would snap to you and face you when he's about to do a special ability, which is normally what they should do. Other times, it'd face in a random direction. Other times, he just wouldn't move. It'd be just facing one way and then wouldn't sort of focus on you. It just seemed very off. So if you're trying to get used to the dance on Will of the Emperor and it don't seem quite right, again, I wouldn't worry about practicing that too much until it's working the same way every time. But overall, quite honestly, for a beta test of raids going out so soon into the beta, normally we're waiting a couple of months before we start raid testing. This was like in 3-4 weeks tops that we actually started getting in the raids, and we've still got things like dual spec not working properly, so we're having to set up multiple characters if we wanted to 3-healer fight. Glyphs not working properly, lots of DCs, the lag. I didn't even mention the lag, but I didn't want to start the video really negatively, but when you pull a boss, you lag for literally about 5 seconds at the start, so it makes it really awkward to get good pulls on the go. Like as a monk, for example, as a Windwalker, trying to get your opener started when you've locked up for 5 seconds feels absolutely awful. But I don't want to fixate on that too much because we know that's not how it's going to be. But I did want to at least let you know about the bugged bosses like Spirit Kings and Elegon, just in case you thought it was normal. And I don't want people thinking that some of these mechanics that are going on is normal when it's not. But yeah, that's my experience of the beta for the last couple of days. Again, if you want to come over and see me raid on Kick tonight, I'll be at kick.com/Scottejaye, probably from about 8 p.m. my time. Probably do pet battles for an hour because I'm sad. And then at 9 p.m. we actually start raiding for a few hours. Hopefully I'll see you over there. And if you enjoyed the video, like, subscribe, consider joining the channel as a member. I don't know, all that stuff. I can't be bothered. I'm going. I'll see you on the next one.